It's an underrated Tuesday coming up here on Locked On Vols. Who's the most underrated? Who's the most overlooked early enrollee for Tennessee this spring? And who's the most overlooked transfer portal edition? There's only 4, so it's 1 of 4, 25%. That and more Tuesday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. I am your host, Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys for making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each every single morning, and this morning for sure. Appreciate you guys and you everydayers for making the show what it is. Everydayers, your questions are coming up in segment number 3. Gonna get a quick preview of Tennessee and Kentucky. What's going to be different about this matchup? Because a couple weeks ago, Tennessee lost to Kentucky, and that was a bad loss. It was, because Kentucky was essentially down 2 starters, and you lost at home, and you had one of those just ridiculously horrific offensive showings. And you couple all that together, and it's one of those games where, oh, man, you should have really won that one. Well, Tennessee's on the road tonight at Rupp Arena. A lot of people favoring the Volunteers in this one. What's going to be different about this matchup? You got Grant Ramey, VolQuest.com coming on in segment number 2. But I want to start the show by talking a little bit of an underrated approach, right? Who is an underrated early enrollee from the class of 2025 that's on campus right now? Who is an underrated transfer portal edition commit that we don't talk about enough, and who's going to play a massive, massive role for Tennessee next football season? That's what I want to start with here on a Tuesday show. We'll start with the recruiting aspect in terms of early enrollees, and I have a couple for you that I thought were kind of interesting when we think, underrated signees that we don't talk about. Everybody talks about David Sanders. Everybody talks about Isaiah Campbell. We talked about a ton on this show. Deshaun Brame. Marion Dye came to mind, but then I looked. I mean, he's Tennessee's 4th highest rated commit, right, or signee. So I can't really mention that. We talk about the wide receivers and Travis Smith and Rodarius Jackson an awful lot. Of course, we talk about the quarterback George McIntyre. But here's one that I think is really interesting, and that is Jayden Loftin. Jayden Loftin is one of these several guys who signed, I think, five defensive linemen that signed in this class. And when you match him up against the Isaiah Campbells of the world, the Marion Dyes of the world, Ethan Utley, who's an in-state prospect, he often gets overlooked. Charles House, interior defensive tackle, he often gets overlooked a lot. And you couple that in with the fact that he had an injury early on this past fall in his senior season and missed some time. It's not like he's coming in here with any juice, if you will. But nice frame, nice measurable, 6'4", about 240 pounds. And, of course, he's going to put a lot of weight on when he gets here. And he's already starting that process right now for Tennessee. And he's not a Leo. He's more of a traditional defensive lineman, strong side defensive end or whatever, but they've got to bulk him up a little bit. But he is really good off the edge. Great, fast twitch. Got some good moves. Made life really, really difficult for opposing quarterbacks at his level. Obviously, he was the best player when he stepped on the field, and that's usually the case for any Southeastern Conference high school prospect. But Jayden Loftin, I feel like, is the guy that nobody's talking about. And again, I think health and his injury had a whole lot to do with it. So he's one of those that are super, super underrated, in my opinion, in terms of the early sign, or in terms of the signing class that are now early enrollees. I'm going to give you another one as well. And we've mentioned his name a couple of times, but I want to throw it back out there because, again, when we think of tight ends, we think of Deshaun Brame. And we're like, oh, boy, Tennessee got one away from Oregon. Tennessee, he can return punts at the high school level. He's got all the measurables and all that you want in a tight end prospect. But we forget about the first tight end that signed in this class, and that was Jack Van Dorselaer. Jack Van Dorselaer is not as highly rated as Deshaun Brame, but still, he's a 4-star, consensus 4-star, or not a consensus 4-star, but On3 industry rankings has him as a 4-star. In fact, On3 was actually the only publication that did not have him listed as a 4-star. But, national prospect 382 in the country, the 23rd ranked tight end, and the 52nd ranked player out of Texas. And boy, when you're coming from Texas, I mean, there's a lot of skilled players in the state of Texas and Georgia and Florida and California. At South Lake Carroll High School, Deshaun Brame played against some of the best talent in all of the country. And he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. They love his skill set at 6'5", 230. He can put a hand in the dirt. He can block the inline stuff. He can come back and play the H-back. He can split out in the slot. He can split out wide. He's a big receiving threat. He's an athlete, has great balance, good with the ball in his hands, but he's good with the ball not in his hands. He's good away from the ball, if you will, with a little basketball terminology. I think Jack Van Dorselaer is a really, really, really underrated prospect in terms of early enrollee in this class. And so I'm going to be watching him. I think everybody's going to be watching Deshaun Brame. He's one of the highest rated signees of this class, and deservingly so. But as we talk about that 12 personnel and what Tennessee did this past year, with Miles Kitselman, Holden Stays, and then Ethan Davis, they felt like they could run a lot more 2 tight end sets when they needed, because they knew they had 3 tight ends that can play. This year it's going to be Miles Kitselman, Ethan Davis. Somebody's going to need to step up. And again, you don't need to live in 12 personnel, but you love to have the ability to run it, because Tennessee could not run it at all its first 3 years here on campus. And you need a third tight end to step up. A lot of the staff really, really likes Cole Harrison in terms of him being one of the more underrated guys on this team, in terms of they kind of found a diamond in the rough. Not that he's going to be a star, but a guy that's much, much better than what they thought they were going to be getting. I think Miles Kitselman this time last year would fall in that category. Like if we were doing this show this time last year, Miles Kitselman would probably be the headliner and leading the show. We need somebody to step up and see what that looks like, and I think that can be Jack Van Dorselaer if it's not Cole Harrison or if it's not Deshaun Brame. So of the early enrollee 2025 recruiting class that I will remind you finished number 10 in the country, 7th in the SEC, I think Jack Van Dorselaer, number 382 ranked prospect in the country, and Jayden Loftin, who is the number 267th ranked prospect in the country, 215 by On3 again, are the 2 underrated early enrollees in this class. If we shift the focus over to the transfer portal, and I joked in the cold open, Tennessee literally only brought in 4. So if you're thinking of who I'm going to say, you got a 25% chance of you being right, right? But the guy I want to focus on is the first fish that Tennessee caught in the transfer portal waters this cycle, and that is Wendell Moe Jr. I think that he's a guy that we're not talking about enough, but he's a guy that's going to play a massive role in the offensive line for Tennessee. 6'3", 330 pounds. Again, he committed to Tennessee December the 18th, a couple days ahead of the college football playoff game. In 2023, of course, he started on the offensive line for Arizona in 2024, but in 2023, part of an offense that finished 20th in total with 448 yards per game, 8th in passing with 308 yards per game, 18th in scoring in the country at 34 points per game. So that's putting him up, putting him down. That's some good stuff back in 23. Made 3 starts, appeared in 4 games as a freshman in 2022. In 2024, this past fall, he was a regular starter, 760 total snaps for Arizona on the offensive line this past fall. In 23, 864 snaps. In 2022, 151. In 2023, he was a second-team All-Pac-12 offensive lineman. Again, I'm intrigued to see what he looks like in this offense, how he can move and all that. But you don't go and get 2 interior offensive linemen from the transfer portal if those guys aren't going to play. And Sam Pendleton of Notre Dame is the other one I'm referencing. But I feel like that one's come in, and sure, it was much later, and it was recency bias maybe. And maybe I'm mentioning Wendell Moe just because he was the first one, and it was almost 2 months ago. But he's an assumed starter, which he is. But I just feel like we don't talk about him. Amari Jefferson's got a high upside at wide receiver, but everybody's intrigued to see what he looks like coming off injury. He didn't really play at Alabama. This is a recruiting win a year later. I think everybody's pleased with Star Thomas, but Star Thomas is playing in a backfield that's going to have a split share. Sam Pendleton, is it going to be guard or center? We talk about that an awful lot. And we just assume, hey, Wendell Moe is going to slide in there at guard, and then that's all she wrote. And that's true. That's accurate. But I feel like he can be a really, really good piece because he's experienced, because he's won awards. Sure, you're stepping up to the Southeastern Conference, the best conference in the league, in my opinion, week in and week out, team in and team out. And I'm intrigued to see what he can do. But because he's experienced, because he's played a whole lot of football, I think by default, Wendell Moe, you pronounce his last name Moe like Jackson Moe, spelled differently. But Wendell Moe is going to be one of Tennessee's better offensive line players for sure. And so I think we're not talking about those guys enough. In the early enrollee, the recruiting side of things, Jayden Loftin, Jack Van Dorselaer, and the transfer portal side of things, I think we're not talking about Wendell Moe enough. What say you? Underrated guys on campus right now. Maybe we'll do this for returners moving forward to tomorrow's show. I would love to hear from you guys at _Caner and at Locked On Vols. Hey, when we come back, what's it going to take for Tennessee to knock off Kentucky tonight in Rupp Arena? Grant Ramey of VolQuest.com. He joins the show next right here on Locked On Vols. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. I'm currently looking for furniture, and their huge selection makes it easy to find pieces that fit my style and my budget. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even on the larger items. Wayfair's site was so easy to navigate that I found everything I needed in no time. There's something for every style and every single home, no matter your space or your budget. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's resolution, your New Year home goals with endless inspiration for space and so much more. Give your home the refresh that it needs with Wayfair. Head on over to Wayfair.com right now. That's Wayfair, Wayfair, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. That is Wayfair. Grant Ramey, VolQuest.com. Not a good loss for Tennessee. I mean, Scott wasn't following or anything, but that's a game Tennessee should have had a couple weeks ago against Kentucky at home. What's it going to take for Tennessee to get this win? Tennessee is a lot of metrics like Tennessee in this game, but on the road at Rupp Arena where it's always a challenge to play.
Yeah, metrics are one thing. Going to Rupp and winning is a different thing. Tennessee's done that under Rick Barnes, I think 4 times during the Rick Barnes era, so that's a big deal, including last year. They scored 103 in that game, I think. It was crazy if you remember that. Last February. Keys to this game, man, settle in, make some shots early. Don't fall into the trap that you fell into 2 weeks ago in Knoxville where it was Kentucky sagging on defense and leaving you open at the three-point line and daring you to take those shots. Now, if they do that again, I don't think you can pass up a ton of those shots because of the way Tennessee shot it at Oklahoma. That blistering first half where they shot 69.2%, they shot 60.4% for the game, so it wasn't just the first half. But settle in, make some shots. I think that's always the key on the road. Have a good start, make some shots, build a little bit of confidence, take a little bit of air out of the arena, out of the building, and kind of go from there. You expect the defense to be there and to play at the level that they're going to play at, what you've become accustomed to under Rick Barnes, but make some shots early, settle in, go from there.
Yeah, kind of what's that balance, Grant? Because Mark Pope essentially said after the game, like, hey, he didn't say it like this, but he pretty much said, hey, we didn't care if they shot threes. We knew they weren't going to make it. We just let them shoot. And Tennessee just kept shooting, and 45 attempts later, Tennessee didn't make many at all. Obviously, the game is about the basketball finding the bottom of the net. That game it didn't. Game against Oklahoma over the weekend, it certainly did. But if they're going to continue to give you that, or is it just you got to take them like you just said, or kind of what is that, even if it's not your strongest day?
I think the balance is Rick wants them to take open shots and shots that are within the offense and shots that are, don't shoot bad passes, don't shoot out of rhythm, don't force it. Like, if they're going to leave you open, you kind of got to take some shots because the same Tennessee team that went 11 for 45 against Kentucky from the three-point line 2 weeks ago in Knoxville is the same Tennessee team that started 5 for 5 from the three-point line in the first half at Oklahoma on Saturday, and they're the same Tennessee team that shot 10 for their first 13 against Missouri the other night last week. So they can hit shots. The offense that you saw against Kentucky is probably not the offense they're going to be all season. The offense they were at Oklahoma is probably not the offense that you're going to see all season. But you got to hope you're better than what you showed last time against Kentucky. If the shots are there, if they're good shots, if they're open shots in rhythm, all that stuff within the offense, take them. If you're missing 8, 9 in a row, stop taking them. Find something else. Paint touches, drive, and mid-range. Whatever you got to do just to see some shots go down. You can't have a repeat performance of what you had in Knoxville.
How is Tennessee a different team a couple weeks later? A couple of big wins under the belt, of course, but how is Tennessee different now than what they were the last time these two teams squared off?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier because this team's 20-4. Like, you don't need a wake-up call if you're 20-4. You don't need a turning point game if you're 20-4. But I think that game kind of opened some eyes, kind of embarrassed them a little bit. Like, you should take care of business at home. That's a rivalry game that means a lot, this Kentucky series with Tennessee, regardless of what the rosters look like, who the head coaches are. It's always going to mean something when basketball. So I think they were probably a little bit embarrassed with the way they played. They didn't, and it wasn't just they missed shots. They didn't defend the three-point line very well. They allowed Kentucky to get some open looks early in that game and kind of take control early on and never really kind of recovered. They had a million chances to win that game in the second half. They just couldn't get a shot to go down. But it's been a different team since then. I think it's been a more confident team. I think it's been to go from losing that game to beating Florida by 20 without Igor, without Zakai. And now you look at what Florida did at Auburn Saturday, scoring 90 points and really whipping Auburn. I mean, that was a really, really good basketball team that Florida handled really well on the road at a tough place to play. So they got to be a team they just have a different confidence level, it feels like, a little different, I don't know, something to them. But based on the way they've played since then, they weren't great in the first half against Missouri. And they kind of snapped to and scored 30 points in a 7-minute stretch in that second half. And they've been a different team since that Kentucky game, whatever happened since then.
What does Kentucky look like this time around? You remember they were down a point guard, down pretty much two starters in that game, which is why it was so frustrating, right? You know, they're shorthanded. You're playing at home. Mm-hmm. I mean, gosh, make a basket at some point, you win that game. But anyway, what's Kentucky look like health-wise this go-around?
Lamont Butler's back. I'm pretty sure he came back. I think Saturday might have been his first game. They beat South Carolina by 23, something like that, in Lexington. That Tennessee game was actually the only game they won in a 5-game stretch, which is kind of insult to injury a little bit. But I think Lamont Butler's back. That's a big deal. He's their veteran point guard. They really don't have any other point guards on roster. Mark Pope talked about that in Knoxville after winning that game, really with no point guard to speak of. They just kind of made it work. And sometimes when you're shorthanded, maybe it's a little bit different. Andrew Carr was the other guy who missed the Tennessee game. Well, he didn't miss it. He played maybe 2 minutes, one possession. Mm-hmm. He kind of has a back deal where it's kind of just like managing the tolerance of it. Like, there's some games or practices where he can't really walk after. I think that's what Mark Pope has said. It's that kind of just nagging pain that's not really going to go away, and you're just trying to manage it. So I expect Tennessee to be healthy. I expect Lamont Butler to play for Kentucky, I would assume, based on what the injury report looks like Monday night. So it'll be a different look of Kentucky, but you're going to go there. You're going to play a lot better, a lot more inspired than you did a couple weeks ago in your own building. So
what you're saying is it's a real John Campbell situation over there at right tackle.
It is a little bit. Start the game. Who knows if you're going to finish the game? It's a pain tolerance thing.
You look at the updated AP polls. You had two teams ahead of Tennessee that lost, yet Tennessee, after a 2-0 week, fell back one spot. Florida is the biggest riser, moving up 3 spots to number 3. But, Auburn, after loss, stays put at number 1. Alabama moves up 1 spot. Then it's Florida. Duke loses. It drops 1 spot. Then the Volunteers at number 5. Obviously not a bad ranking, but it is kind of weird when you have if you're ranked at number 4 and you have 2 teams in front of you that lose and you drop a spot after a 2-0 week. What do you make of this?
It's just really hard to rank college basketball teams, especially when the coaches poll, the top 4 are all SEC teams, and 4 out of the top 5 in the AP top 25 are SEC teams. Duke's the only exception among that group. So when you have an Auburn team that's ranked above Florida, despite Florida just going to Auburn and handling Auburn with relative ease in their own building, that looks weird. When you have a Florida team that's ranked ahead of Tennessee after Tennessee beat them a week ago at home by 20 without 2 starters, that looks weird. But it's also it's hard not to think Florida is deserving of that ranking after what they looked like against Auburn. Like, in this league, as good as it is, you're going to have teams just beating up on each other.
Really appreciate Grant Ramey stopping by and joining the show here on a Tuesday. Tennessee basketball, of course, gearing up. Just a massive rivalry game, one of the best in the SEC. Tennessee at Kentucky tonight at Rupp Arena. That game's at 7 o'clock. And looking forward to seeing how Tennessee performs in that one. We've reached that point in the show, that point in the week. It's third segment here on a Tuesday where we answer mailbag questions from you everydayers. Thank you so much for sending them in. We'll start with Braden. Braden's got a couple. If you could change one thing in Tennessee athletics, what would it be? I read this earlier when you sent it, man, and I've been thinking about it, and I hate to be that guy. Trust me, there are things that frustrate me, and ask me 2 months from now when I'm in the middle of baseball season, I'll probably have a laundry list for you. But, I mean, you're so aligned from an athletic department stance. You've got great sports information directors that work with you to make your job and your life easier. make getting access fun, easy to where you can talk to players and do unique stories and perspectives. All the construction going on at Neyland Stadium, the Anderson Training Facility, the construction coming to Thompson Bowling Arena, the Food City Center, and of course what's happening at Lindsey Nelson Stadium right now. They're addressing that. I don't know. This might seem just a little. Really, the only thing I think of right now, if I could change one thing, and it's not going to change because it's not in the plans, but I think the Food City Center is so ugly. And I know I'm not alone in this. I think it is such an eyesore. I think it's ugly. And so I would change that. And again, it's outdated. It was built not a long time ago, but there are new trends and everything now and all that. But I think it's ugly. I don't think it's beautiful like what Lindsey Nelson Stadium is going to be. I don't think it's beautiful like what Neyland Stadium is. I think it's kind of an eyesore. That's just my opinion. Another question, what storyline in SEC football intrigues you the most heading into next season? Right now, again, and this is low-hanging fruit, the quarterback pecking order. Who's going to be where? Garrett Nussmeier. I'm not an LSU fan, not a Brian Kelly fan, but I'm high on Nussmeier. I've been high on him all offseason. I think that he's talking about underrated in segment number 1. I think he's the most underrated quarterback in the SEC and probably the best one, at least right now. But what does John Mateer look like at Oklahoma? Jackson Arnold, is he going to be any better at Auburn? Nico, does he take that next step? Arch Manning, the key to the castle, the key to the Corvette. It sure is, man. How good are you going to be? Everybody's got you up, listed as the top-ranked quarterback in the SEC or whatever. Go prove it. DJ Lagway, is there going to be another step there to your progression? You were pretty daggone good there at spurts at Florida. Turnovers were an issue. Can you put those behind you? And I know I'm missing a lot of other quarterbacks. Diego Pavia, what do you look like in year number 2 of that run? Zach Calzada's back in the SEC. Hey-o. I don't expect much from him. But you know what I'm trying to say? What do these quarterbacks look like? What's the quarterback dynamic going to be in the Southeastern Conference? Nico better be up there in front. He better be one of those first, second, third guys everybody mentions when they talk about SEC quarterbacks. And if he is, then Tennessee should be in good shape. Braden, as always, man, I appreciate you. Going to go over to the Locked On Vols account to my guy, Bruce. He sent me a couple over the weekend, or this was last week, actually. Go Lady Vols when they beat UConn. If I didn't, I tried to make mention of this on yesterday's show. If I didn't, I apologize. How about them Lady Vols? What a freaking win over UConn. UConn ranked 5 in the country. I think Lady Vols are, 16, 17, somewhere around there. Obviously we know what Kim Caldwell's doing. What a phenomenal first year. And I think she's lost 5 or 6 games by, not even 20 points. It's unreal. But I did not see Lady Vols knocking off UConn the other night. But, hey, that's awesome. Anytime Gino loses, it's a great day. It is a great day. Speaking of Gino, Bruce says, I don't exactly remember, but what is the hate between UConn and Lady Vols, especially for Gino? Well, simple answer is it's a rivalry. Okay, what women's basketball is, as many of you guys know listening and watching right now, women's basketball right now is great. The parity is incredible. Back in the day, it was the Lady Vols with Pat Summitt. It was UConn with Gino. It was a couple other teams. There wasn't that much. And what the rivalry with the Lady Vols and with UConn, with Gino and with Pat, I think it just helped elevate the sport in general by a couple of years at least. It was just fierce. It was daunting. It was great basketball. 2 coaches that didn't like each other. Gino always complaining about refs and how his teams were not called in a fair game when coming down here. Allegedly bad-mouthing Pat Summitt and the Tennessee Lady Vols basketball program on the recruiting trail. Bad blood. Here's another bad blood. When Gino left Candace Parker off the Olympic team, are you kidding me? She went on to play, 5-6 more years in the WNBA, won most valuable player, won a couple of championships, right? And Gino left her off in, 2015, 16? Oh, gosh, that's a lot of it right there. Gino, just out of spite, just left Candace Parker off the Olympic team. Made no sense. But allegedly, he would badmouth and poor mouth, the Tennessee program on the recruiting trail and all that. A lot of that rubbing's racing, right? A lot of that's just recruiting. A lot of that is what it is. But just the rivalry. I don't have to give you reasons why you hate Florida, why you hate Alabama. You know what I'm saying? I was raised to hate Alabama, hate Florida, with a passion. So that's kind of what that is. Bruce has another question. Who are you taking to Media Day and why? Good question, man, as we sit here in February. SEC Media Days will be at the end of July. Nico, you got to take him now. He is your second-year starting quarterback, third year in the program. Absolutely have to take Nico for sure. And so you take Nico. I think you take maybe Miles Kitzelman, because Cooper's gone, Dylan Sampson's gone, Brew McCoy's gone. Maybe Miles Kitzelman. Defensively, Bryson Eason, Arian Carter, Jermon McCoy. One of that trio. I think you can't go wrong with a lot of those guys. Bruce, as always, man, appreciate you. And thanks so much for watching the show every single day. All right, more questions. Here we go. Let's go to the bookmark tab. A lot of baseball questions are in here, so here we go. This is from Jared. Going into baseball season, how would you describe and compare this year's 2025 team to any previous Tony Vitello teams? It doesn't feel like the 24 team or the 22 teams, but maybe the 23 teams and 21 teams, minus the arm talent. Fair comp? What do you say? Bonus question: chili dog or relish dog at baseball games? I don't like relish, so chili dog for sure. I think 2022, there was a lot of uncertainty coming into the season because you had two freshmen start on weekends, but you had a lot of talent on that team for sure. 23, you had a ton of talent. You won the transfer portal. Maui Ahuna, Griffin Merritt, some other guys that helped add to your roster, and you returned. 2022 also had Chase Nolander coming in. You returned all of that production for 23. You lost a couple. I think this team, though we don't know what it looks like right now, especially on the mound, that is going to be a work in progress for the first month of the year. But I think this team has more talent than any of those teams, and it's not even close. I did my position preview for the infield the other day and over at VolQuest.com, and I'm just sitting here and at some point I just say, guys, look, you can have 17 different combinations of the infield that they like. Ariel Antigua would be starting for pretty much any other team in the country right now, but he's a utility player back up here. Manny Marin, true freshman, nobody knows who he is right now, but boy, he might be the first off the bench because he's that good. Levi Clark's bat's got to get in there somewhere. Chris Newstrom, who nobody's talking about as a true freshman, has been phenomenal this fall. Again, there's just so much. So, talent-wise, I think this is the most talented team that's been here on Rocky Top, in my opinion. Now, again, Simo's not on this team. Blake's not on this team. Dylan Dryland's not on this team. Kavar Sears, I get all that. But there are going to be guys who step up that you're going to fall in love with that are just dudes. Tennessee won the draft last summer in a massive way. So, talent-wise, it's up there with some of the best teams. Depth-wise, this might be the deepest team that Tennessee has. They just kind of have to figure it out a little bit. Jared, as always, man, I appreciate it. Speaking of Ariel Antigua, Rob wants to know, I've not heard anything on Ariel Antigua, and I've always felt he would make an impact on this team, especially on defense. Has he been injured, or did the transfers who come in ahead of him? A couple things. Last fall, he broke his thumb or something, so that kind of backtracked him, or it was in preseason actually. Preseason going into the year, broke his thumb, and so that had him miss the first half of the season. Since then, he hasn't really been hitting like he was prior to that. Now, his glove, it's elite. He has the best glove of any infielder, any outfielder, any Tennessee Volunteer on the roster. His glove is elite. He can play third. He can play second. He can play short. He can play any of those positions, and he will play those positions. You'll see him. He, like I said a moment ago, he would start pretty much anywhere else in the country because his glove is so elite. It was a midweek game, doesn't matter. First start of the season, it was a midweek game against Tennessee Tech, I believe, last April. He tied a Tennessee program record for 9 assists in one game, his first game ever. Again, he'll be a late inning defensive replacement, just like he was last year when he went on to play second base in the 9th inning to go win the World Series. So he's one of those depth pieces that we're all talking about. We'll see because of injuries. Could he start the season in place of Andrew Fisher at third? We'll see. But again, Manny Marin's right there, true freshman. So I think Manny Marin, I think the battle between who's the first guy, who's the first utility is really interesting because before a couple weeks ago, I'd say slam dunk Ariel Antigua. after the last couple of weekends and the way that Manny Marin ended the pizza series, I'd be like, well, not so fast, because Manny Marin, the glove is not as elite, but it's really good. But Manny Marin's bat is phenomenal. All these guys are playing behind Gavin Keelan at second, or middle infield, Dean Curley middle infield, and Andrew Fisher at third. I mean, it's not even fair. So Ariel, great guy to have on the bench. He'll play a number of different positions, but he'll be behind the starting infielders for most of the year if everybody stays healthy. Callum wants to know, a lot of baseball here. There's only one question. What's the latest on Alberto Osuna? Will he be eligible for opening day? Yeah, at the time of this recording, nothing's changed. And I mean, I check in every day. I've been told as soon as something happens, they'll let me know. It's not a if he'll be eligible, it's just a when, but the NCAA is not in any hurry. So we'll see what happens. I mean, he's been practicing and all that, but you just kind of have to, it's very much a day-by-day thing. But Tennessee's got a logjam over there at first base. Let's go to Jacob. When I put out the Lindsey Nelson Stadium renovation stuff, the pictures, the videos, and all that, Jacob said not as much progress as we had hoped, but next year the kingdom will be complete, right? Yes to both of those. It should be done prior to the 26th season. It was a 2-year project, really a 3-year project that originally was supposed to be crammed into 2 years. Tennessee playing well into the month of June, hosting all those, regionals, super regionals, and all that really put them behind schedule. Plus, when they started digging and that road found utilities that put them behind schedule and all that. So they ran into some complications, but it should be done prior to 2026. Ross Jackson wants to know where the students are going to sit in the new renovation project. Well, they put standing room only seats above kind of where the batting cages are down the right field line. So that's where the students are going to sit at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. And the last one here is going to go to Robert, OG here of Locked On Vols. He's been on the show before as well. Super Bowl showed how much offensive line protection matters. KC might have the best right guard in Trey Smith, but the offensive line is only as good as its weakest link, and they couldn't protect Mahomes. Who will be the weak link for UT? Center, guard, true freshman David Sanders? Good question. Really good question. Tennessee's going to have 2 starting new guards. Tennessee's going to have a new starting center. And likely, Tennessee is going to have a true freshman starting a right tackle. So, I don't know, man. I mean, spring practice isn't here yet. Eventually, David Sanders will not be a weak link, but I don't think it's disrespectful to say that he might begin as that weak link, right? Sure, there's other new starters on that offensive line, but you're a true freshman, and I do believe you'll be a starter on this team. But I also believe that you're not strong enough. You're not big enough. You'll get there in a hurry, but game 1, you ain't going to be there. And so I think by game 5, he's going to be much better. But I would say David Sanders, if he is a starter to begin the year at right tackle, that's just kind of where I would go right now. If not him, probably the center, just because it's been Cooper Mays for 5 years, and now it's not Cooper Mays. And so we just truly don't know what that's going to look like. Everybody, thank you so much for sending in those questions, those comments, those concerns every single Tuesday right here on Locked On Vols. We take your mailbag questions. Thank you guys so much. Hey, let me know, who's the most underrated 2025 signee that's an early enrollee right now? Who do we not talk about enough? Who is the most underrated get from the transfer portal? Would love to hear from you guys. We'll ask Josh Ward this question tomorrow, all that and more. Locked On Vols returns on Wednesday. Tell your friends, subscribe to the show. Let's continue to grow this thing. Appreciate you guys as always. This is Locked On Vols.